Aretha Franklin. Her name is enough. A voice that could hold both power and vulnerability, that could whisper, preach, comfort, and command. Sometimes all within a single line. From the gospel churches of Detroit to the world's greatest concert halls, Aretha Franklin became more than a singer. She became a sound of dignity, freedom, and soul. The Queen of Soul. In this episode of Before Showtime, a podcast by Metropole Orkest, you'll hear from conductor Jules Buckley and vocalist Sheléa. Sheléa is one of the few vocalists of her generation with the range, with the musicality, and the emotional depth to take on the legacy of Aretha Franklin while still making the songs her own. Together, they explore the music and legacy of an artist who shaped generations through her voice, musicianship, and soul. The podcast is recorded on the day of them performing a tribute to Aretha Franklin at TivoliVredenburg in Utrecht, honoring songs that are deeply loved, deeply personal, and almost untouchable. We'll hear from Jules and Sheléa how Aretha continues to live and evolve on stage today. My name is Eva Cleven. I'm a radio DJ, presenter, and host of this podcast. Welcome to Before Showtime. So, Jules and Sheléa, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm very excited because this is the first episode of this podcast series for Metropole Orkest Before Showtime. And I'm so happy it's with the both of you. And I'm so happy that we can talk about an absolute legend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Before we dive into Aretha's repertoire and her quotes and things I have gathered up for you, I want to know, what does a day of performance look like for you when you, step on stage with Metropole Orkest? Sheléa.
Oh, goodness. We're starting with me. Okay. Well, it starts with, I would say, a lot of hydration. Because as you said, Aretha's music is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. So I have to be, especially doing these shows, some of them back to back, I have to be completely hydrated. So I'm steaming. I'm waking up steaming. I'm drinking as much water as I can. Trying to kind of take it easy, not talk as much, which is kind of ironic that we're doing a podcast right
Shall
on the
I jump
day.
in? This is where I jump in.
After you took a sip, Jules, do you also hydrate?
I do. I tried to drink like 3 liters a day or whatever it is, and but
That's impressive.
I mean, I don't know whether I get to like 100 milliliters, honestly. No. But anyway, Sheléa, keep going because I was...
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. Taking it easy. But for sound check, I like to... in fact, I just talked about this online, is that it's always important to, in sound check, do what you're going to do in the show. So sometimes people save it. I don't believe in doing that. Okay. Because I think it can be, it can kind of create issues when the show comes. So all of a sudden now you're singing full voice, and now the engineers, they're freaking out, trying to adjust the levels if you would have given that. Now there might be like certain notes I might not sing that are like a little too high in that moment. I don't want to like use my voice up, but everything I'll give you a couple. I'll give you a couple of those notes, so you know what my loudest note is going to be. You know what my softest note is going to be. So I'm getting a little technical, but that is my kind of typical.
And that's
day.
also on your mind. Like you wake up and you kind of tune in with your voice. Like, how do I feel today? What do I need?
Absolutely, absolutely. My little thing that I do is like, whoo! And if that was easy to come out, then I'm like, okay, it's gonna be okay. And only I know how that feels. But sometimes it'll be a lot of air instead of tone, and so, or it might have pulled a little bit when I did it. So it's little things like that lets me know it's going to be a good show or a challenging one.
So how did the ooh feel today?
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Yeah, because it sounded beautiful.
Was
but
that the first one, or did you...
Did you ood before?
I think I ood last night, and then I just ooh throughout the day, and like, oh God, what is going to happen today?
Do you ever kind of reset it, like, no, that first one didn't count, and then you hit it again just to see?
Well, that's such a good question, because sometimes sound checks will feel really bad to me. I'm so grateful that I have been able to be so intimate with my instrument where I feel everything, every little tiny change. And so people will say all the time, like, oh, I didn't notice, but I know how it feels and I'm able to work around that. And that's just because of the intimacy of doing it over and over and over again. So there have been times where I had like a really tough sound check for me. But then the show ended up being like incredible because I just maybe needed to just get the cobwebs off a little bit, continue gargling, doing the teas. You know, I have this weird little trick where I pour honey down my throat, but I don't swallow it. I just
these are trade secrets,
and I just let it slide down, and it's a very weird thing.
So but do you sort of like a bird kind of swallowing a little?
So I get the bottle and I just lean back, and then it just goes slowly down, and it's like you have to get the perfect balance. Because if it's too much honey, then it's like
then you choke. Okay, yeah.
Do you know what? I even found out this crazy thing about honey the other day. Did you know that it doesn't freeze?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
Yeah, it's only
the molecules
sugar.
Are just
there's no water in it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, fun fact number 2, like the ooh and the honey. I love it.
But you know what? I just read also recently that it doesn't go bad.
That's right.
Yeah. I didn't know the freezing part, but I also read because they said they found something in like some tomb, and it was like honey that was like still good to eat.
After this, we're gonna gather up some honey and just like get a shot.
I just asked for honey for my dressing room, so I'm in good shape.
What about you, Jules? What kind of day do you have when you know you have a performance like this in the evening?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I tend to kind of, when I wake up, obviously it's on your mind immediately what's coming up that evening. We've done 2 shows already. So today, for example, I would have woken up and maybe over my breakfast, I will have a think about how the gig went, the last one, and what we did and what we could do better tonight, and make myself a little set of notes for that I'm going to hit in the sound check. And then I tend to kind of have a pretty sort of regulated day, really. I always try to do a little bit of exercise to kind of blast the endorphin into the brain. And in a way, in the same way Sheléa was saying, you know, like you're not going to sing loads or chat too much through the day, I always tend to sort of conserve all my energy for when I hit the venue today. So from now, hanging with you and the guys. And then, I mean, I think also, honestly, that Sheléa is being very modest because, as we know, in the subject we're going to dive into, like, not many people, honestly speaking, can pull this music off.
No.
So I think an artist like Sheléa, she knows what she's got in the tank, and she knows exactly what she needs to do to deliver this music. And I think it's an interesting one as well about sound checks and what people put into sound checks, because I've had experiences, and you've probably had this too, where some singers put everything in, but they want to do every track and stuff, and then they get to the gig later and they're at the tank's at 60% and it can't go up. But I think an artist like you know, you're able to kind of, you've got loads of gears, and I think that just comes through a lifetime of being a student of the music, you know. I think you have to be that way in order to pull off this, and that's what Aretha was ultimately, and that's why she was so crazily good, you know.
Yeah, because she really, really was, and we all know her songs. I mean,
Oh yeah.
About my job today, I will follow you around a little bit, maybe ask you some questions here and there, also right before showtime, if that's okay, to get kind of a feel of what it's like for a Metropole Orkest, but also for a vocalist and solist like you. And as a bonus, we have a full song of this performance tonight that we're going to let you kind of hear in an extended podcast before showtime. So if you're watching the conversation on YouTube, make sure to get the full audio experience by listening to the podcast. You'll find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Search on Before Showtime podcast by Metropole Orkest. So let's dive deeper into this world and music of Aretha Franklin. Sheléa, when did you first hear Aretha's voice or her songs? Take us back to that very moment, if you remember. And you probably
I absolutely do.
Cool.
I absolutely do. I don't know if it was necessarily the first time I ever heard her, because I feel like there are some artists that have just always been in your life. You know, you got this record over here with Stevie Wonder. I don't remember the first time I heard a Stevie Wonder song. It's just he's always been in our lives, you know, musically. And so I felt the same way about Aretha. I did grow up in this little small town, Bakersfield, California, smack in the middle of California. And my family, I was only allowed to listen to gospel music growing up. And so I didn't know, some of those early Aretha hits at that time when I'm, 7, 8 years old. The album I know backwards and forwards is Amazing Grace, her gospel album, which is ironically her best-selling album to date. And so I have just incredibly vivid memories of driving to church, and that was the soundtrack to my ride to church, Amazing Grace. And I remember she's got this song, she's singing Never Grow Old. And I'm 7, 8 years old, and I'm having this emotional response. I don't really understand why yet. I haven't lived yet, but it's bringing tears to my eyes at that really, really young age. And so she had that impact on all ages. We're talking about this little girl who is just listening to her gospel album and is feeling something so deep, without necessarily the language at that time or even the life experience, but yet it was affecting me that way. And so that's why it has been so rewarding now, even with when we were talking about the set list, Jules and I, these songs were really chosen with a lot of intention and a lot of thought behind it. And I wanted to start the show with Precious Memories because that's actually how she starts the album. And of course, Amazing Grace is in the set list as well. But I just feel like that is really the core of who Aretha was.
Yeah.
Before anything, she was just a church girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about you, Jules? Do you remember the first time you heard an Aretha song?
I think so.
And what song was it?
Yeah, it would have been one of the major hits because my mum's brother had when he was growing up in just outside of London, he collected soul records. Like that was all he was into. And so he had an absolute stack of them, and a chunk of those made their way into our house. So when I was a little kid, like you've got a lot of Atlantic ones here, right? And do you remember that there's like a series or a line from Atlantic which is like This Is Soul or something, and on it's like a collection of like the best of the best.
Yeah, I have the Otis Redding This Is Soul.
I've got it too.
You got it too. It's a good one.
Exactly.
Good record.
Yeah, I've got the same record, right? And so there are a few of those kicking around, like Motown. Like Motown had their volume 1 to like 18 chart busters or whatever, and so there were a lot of those in the collection. And so I guess like Respect or something like that would no doubt have been on one of these vinyls that my dad would have been playing. And I think it's contentious, but on the, because on these records you'd have had some ridiculous talent, track after track.
Yeah.
But no one had a voice like Aretha. So
no.
I distinctly remember feeling like, well, this is, what is that?
If you're talking about Respect, you probably noticed it because you've heard it a couple of times before everybody listening and tuning in. There was this thing that happened when I hear Aretha's first lines of Respect. Her voice does something crazy. It kind of flips. And it's still in the recording. I was wondering if you can tell me, what did you think as a singer, Sheléa, when you first heard this? I have a little snippet.
What you want, baby, I got it. What you need, do you know I got it?
The need is really a need. There's this vocal crack in this.
Yeah.
And it's in the record. I mean, I just got the vocals out of the instrumentals.
Right.
But if you
isolated them.
Yeah. I isolated them for everybody to hear it.
Yeah.
You cannot unhear it once you hear it, by the way. So sorry about that. but talking about a voice and a vocalist, and also, well, being an example, you first recognized her on a compilation album, and Respect maybe standing out.
Probably, yeah.
What do you think happened in this recording?
I think there was some vocal fatigue going on.
Yeah.
I think it was some vocal. I can hear it. It's like a little, it skipped a little bit, and that happens from a little hoarseness, a little dryness. But I think what I love about it is that, I don't know if you guys know the producers, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. They did all of Janet, New Edition, Boys to Men. Incredible songwriter producers.
They just had that record into the Grammy Hall of Fame, didn't they?
They did. Absolutely. But something that they really, really taught me, they said, Sheléa, and I remember thinking like, this doesn't make sense to me, but now I totally understand it. When I first met them, I hadn't gone through like the big heartbreak of my life. And so I was singing and it was perfect. Mm-hmm. It was always in tune. Mm-hmm. It was, and I still sing in tune. That's always the goal, right? I mean, you want to sing in tune. You want to be in good voice.
Yeah.
Right. But they said, when you go through your first heartbreak, your voice is going to change. It is going to be baptized by pain. And you're going to be able to use and go to another level. Mm. And they were so right. They also taught me that what I think is a perfect take is not always the take that gives you that feeling and that heartache. So when I hear her cough on her, do that little hiccup on what you need, that's vulnerable. Yeah. That makes me feel that in a way as opposed to if she actually sang it perfectly. With clarity.
Yeah.
That's what stands out to me when I listen to those very bare, naked vocals. You hear the vulnerability that you kind of missed with all of the instruments.
Is that one of the things that makes Aretha unique, you think? That she was like, okay, let's put that version on the record. Because probably there was a version where she sang it perfectly, I imagine. So that's also like a choice. Like, no, I want that. Because she was pretty particular in what she wanted.
Yeah.
Do we know who was producing that record?
I'm not sure who produced that one, but also like, because in the modern day, you see videos, right? You've got Billie Eilish talking about how she tracks up her vocal, and it's like 479 vocal takes all chopped into one over the course of 2 minutes, 57 seconds.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds great. Well done. But Aretha was in the time where the technical facilities of the studio were pretty limited as well. True. So, right, you're on tape. Maybe they had, I don't know, 24 channels max, probably less at the time she recorded that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it was about, the overarching feeling of things. And like, okay, this is cool. This is good enough. Like this has the soul or this has the vibe. So we're going to take that one with its imperfections. Because if you look at other artists, I saw a clip online the other day, it was like a guy was like, hey, I've always wanted to tune this Michael Jackson note. Mm-hmm. So then they took a clip of it and then he tuned it. And then when he played it back, it kind of just wasn't as interesting.
No.
Right.
I do think in those days, like way more musicians were playing live together in the studio. Like the band was laying it down.
Absolutely.
The vocalist comes in and lays, maybe sometimes they were laying it down together, sometimes with a full orchestra in the room at the same time. Like...
Frank Sinatra, Nat,
totally.
All of them. Sarah, they were all doing that.
Exactly,
yeah.
So, and I kind of miss that.
Me too.
Well,
Me too.
Then you have the perfect job because that is what you do. I mean,
you
go on stage. You go on stage and do what these guys were doing way back.
That's right.
You're performing it live. There's no doing it. I mean,
it's crazy because I remember when Tony Bennett was recording his album of duets. Mm-hmm. And, you had some of, I would say, newer artists that were joining him. And some of them were saying how intimidated they felt because when they did record it in the studio, it was the whole orchestra.
Yeah.
It was everybody.
Wow.
You walked in, we're pressing play, everybody's on. And so sometimes in this newer generation, you're trained to get this one line, get this verse, get this word. But back then, as you said, everybody was in the same room, breathing the same air, existing at the same time on this body of music. And I think you hear the difference. I think it's drastically different. It's more connected. It's vibier,
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's standing the test of time.
So on the question of who produced that version is Jerry Wexler and Arif Mardin.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, heavyweights.
Heavyweights.
Yeah, heavyweights. Yeah.
For sure.
I want to ask something because I was listening to a lot of Aretha songs and they all, well, not all, but some of them have like a beautiful 60s or 70s fade out. But you're playing with an orchestra. You can't fade out. So what did you do to end a very classic Aretha song that does not have like a set ending? I have so many questions about this.
Okay, yeah, this is really interesting because this also comes down to the culture of the day.
Sure.
I mean, back in the day when a lot of songs that people would go into the studio, they've already been jamming them live for a long time, right? So they'd have figured out maybe like the kind of showstopper ending, but then they think, well, that doesn't really work for the record, and obviously the producers get involved with the artist. So for these shows with Sheléa, we just kind of talked about how the form and how you want to end it and what works for you and what works for us, and just tried to come up with some nice little bookends that make sense musically without diminishing the feeling. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm just digressing, but there used to be this thing where there was like a fee. I don't know whether people ever know this, but there was a fee that used to get lumped onto records, and it was for the fade out guy.
No way.
Yeah, serious. But this guy never existed. No,
he never existed.
No one ever knows where the cash was going.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Yeah. So it'd be like the person that would just pull down just pull it down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Slower.
Yeah.
But because I love fade outs, and they don't really happen anymore, do they?
Oh, I hate fade outs.
Oh, is that because you're also DJing a lot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when I'm on the radio and doing a DJ, I never know when to end the song, because sometimes it just gets too soft and there's nothing, and silence on the radio is just...
Well, like take one track, like Think, obviously has a kind of showstopper ending to it, doesn't it? Which is brilliant. Most of the time it was often like the slow ballads that wouldn't have would need to be faded because the band just starts cruising at the end, and that was often also because they were figuring out the parts in the studio, and then they would jam the song. And if you talk to someone like Greg Fillinganes or any of these legends that have played on a ton, sometimes they would hit 20 takes of the song, but it would be 20 different sounding. They couldn't comp them together.
No.
So they often would just
interesting.
keep. And
I love a good fadeaway though. I do. I get your technical part of DJing, but because you know what I would do when I was younger, particularly, because sometimes they would still be singing like they're butt off. So I would be trying to crank it up to hear
I did the same
what
thing.
are they doing? Like, oh my God, like they didn't even that's how good they are. They didn't even put their good stuff like on high volume. So that was always fun.
With what record did you find like of your? Can you remember?
I can't even remember, but just in general, like gospel artists, the Winans, just they would be ad-libbing. They're going out, they're it's like it's looping, right? They're in the vamp.
I think
and they're really getting into it, and then it starts turning down like and then hit that run right there. That was the one.
That's such a good image of you turning up the volume as the fade out guy just faded it out. Yeah.
I think I'm so into that. It's a really good point. Yeah, because like bands like the Four Tops, for example. Yeah. Like what was one of the singers, Levy? Anyway, like the main dude, like he would have incredible ad-libs, and their tracks were always getting faded out. I know what you mean. And then you'd push the headphones a bit closer to your head.
Exactly.
Oh, what's that? Oh, yeah, nice. I wonder whether it created any arguments late after the record came out. Like, you didn't wait for my...
didn't wait for my
riff.
I
think it continued. I think it was like a fun little nugget for fans. I really think that the artist was like, I'm going to make them turn it up. At least some of them.
Sometimes the ending of a song is like beautifully wrapping like a big present, and it can be so beautiful. And sometimes I miss that. But by the way, it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the set list of tonight's tribute to Aretha Franklin. There are 18 tracks with an encore, 19 songs in total.
Oh, God.
And I think, 19 songs in total. Let's see what songs cannot, in your case, Sheléa, cannot miss from this set list. Like you have to hear, have to sing, have to feel that song as a tribute to Aretha Franklin.
I remember when Jules and we first started talking about it. So I don't know if you know, but we debuted this show at the Royal Albert Hall in London back in 2022. Mm-hmm. And I think obviously maybe 2021, 2022 is when we started really thinking about the set list and really what that was going to have on it. Now, we came into it saying, we know we have to do Respect. We know we have to do Natural Woman. Mm-hmm. Some of those. But I told him, I said, listen, I know we have to do the hits and I promise I'm down for it. But what I really want to show in this tribute is Aretha, the musician, Aretha, the songstress who sang for soundtracks, Aretha, the jazz singer, because before she was doing her own material, she was doing jazz standards like Skylark. So that's a big part of her identity. And, they were calling her No-Hit Aretha. And sometimes you look back, I know probably at that moment she felt weird about singing these probably, in her mind, sanitized standards. But we look back on those records and recordings very much like Frank Sinatra during that little era of time where he wasn't really popping. You go back and those are amazing recordings. They just weren't hip to, in that time. But I think when you go back, you see, wow, how special those records are. So those are the ones that I kind of fought for. Songs like Skylark, which I remember the very first time I heard her sing that, and she hits this crazy high A flat. And I'm like, oh my God, that note came out of nowhere. I wanted to include Sparkle because after a slump, Curtis Mayfield, he wrote and produced that whole record for her and put her back on top. She was kind of like, headed a little, just going down a little slope, and that brought her back. So those are some of the songs that I feel like I wouldn't want to do this show without some of those rare songs. It's more of like the deep tracks for me. Yeah.
And what about you, Jules? Were you immediately on board with this interpretation of a tribute?
Well, Sheléa, she just said it. She said
she made a convincing
to
case.
Wrestle for these. She threw me under, and it was a fight.
Ooh.
It was no.
We fight.
Well, I have the set list right here,
way.
and they're on. So good job.
The truth is, like Sparkle, because I didn't know that track,
right?
And that's my favorite track now,
wow.
for sure.
Wow.
And I think, like, I've always been a big Curtis fan, and I didn't know that even actually up until this second. But it makes sense, and part of me, I bet he even wrote it in that key,
right.
And he was just doing his falsetto thing, and then he probably sang it in terms like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I just think that track it's kind of indicative of a period of music where I just love the production. There are on a lot of tracks from that time, a lot of orchestra on it. You know, obviously all those Philly tracks and stuff, and there were guys in those days, the arrangers, they were writing at the peak of time, they were hitting 30 to 34 arrangements in a week. Yeah, when Motown was booming and Atlantic and it was all kicking off everywhere, it was 30 to 35 a week. And on Sparkle, the arrangement is what we play tonight is a kind of faithful representation of that.
For sure.
And I just think it's such a vibey tune. So I love all the hits, but I think that the audience deserves to know the deeper cuts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, again, somewhere having the link to Quincy with that is brilliant.
Yeah,
and Skylark, of course, because what you just said there as well, maybe for a lot of listeners, it was, we all just presumed that Aretha was smashing it from the beginning.
Right.
She must have come on like a whirlwind and it was hit after hit. But in those days, it was like, honestly, I spoke to a friend of mine who's been in the record business for a long time, and he was saying that, in the 60s, 70s, people were clamoring to get into the shop to get the latest release, and it was like Star Wars, because you'd have Marvin would have a record, Diana would have a record, Aretha would have a record, right? So from left to right to center, it was records all over, and I think you had to be at this peak standard just to survive. It's crazy looking back on that, really,
Yeah. It's amazing. Amazing time.
Yeah. Must have been great to go in and grab one of those 7 inches.
I saw this interview with Aretha later on in her life, and it was stated that she had like 40 records. 40 records came out from gospel to all the hits to the everything. It's 40 records. It's a crazy amount.
That is.
Yeah, some people these days take like 10 years to do their third record or whatever, don't they?
But let's just also say it was like 8 songs on the record too.
Yeah, and the runtime of it, because it was on vinyl, would have been about 35 minutes.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then you would get to do like the double disc, and but it was. And then when it was the cassette, it was like 4 songs on one side, 4 songs on the other.
And you know what? I even remember, like, because my mum and dad, like when they met in London, like they were collecting loads and loads of soul records and disco and stuff. And I remember my dad used to say that on a lot of those releases, often the hit would be on it, maybe 2 hits,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the rest of the record was a little bit,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether you guys have had noticed the same, but I wonder whether that's why all these kind of greatest hits start to come out.
Well, I've noticed that, but I think the point that Sheléa made as well, like sometimes there are really gems that nobody know, that you don't know, that's not in the collective memory of society or music business history. There's little gems in there. Maybe it's just a verse or a note that's been sang in a certain way. It's still very magical to explore, I think. Yeah.
You know, Jules did mention somewhere, and I do want to just point out that is also super, super important for us to include because, as he said, Q and Aretha, that was their only collaboration that they did together. And Q means a lot to both of us. In fact, that's how we even met.
Can
back
you talk
in
about
2019.
that? Because you're close to Quincy.
Yes.
Quincy Jones we're talking about here.
Yes.
Yeah.
My Q, you know, I I feel so blessed that I have been able to like live in the time of Quincy Delight Jones, you know, and I came obviously at the end, but it has been just so meaningful to my life. He has been such an angel in my life. His production company managed me for a bit. And so 2019, he was doing this world tour. We did the O2 Arena in London. We did Accor Hotels Arena in Paris. And then we ended in the Montreux Jazz Festival. And this was like 2019. And so I was, you know, doing a myriad of songs. I was doing You Put a Move in My Heart, Lady in My Life, and all these. And I, you know, meet this guy. He comes up and he's conducting. He's a little quiet, a little reserved. And it was Jules.
I was just marking, just checking things, checking them.
But one thing I really noticed, like right away, is he was so precise, but he did it in such a kind way. And if you guys know, any of the listeners out there know, like just sometimes the culture with conductors and orchestras, it's not always like super warm fuzzies.
It can be a little dictatorial. Is that the word? Yeah.
Or just a little, you know, like you're just maybe a little uncomfortable because it's tense. It feels very tense. Yeah. So Jules made the environment very warm, very like easy. But he still wasn't letting anything slide. But he would do it in such a loving but very precise way. And I was immediately drawn to him, and we just had this instant connection. And that's, you know, we said at the end of the tour, I think it was like the summer of 2019, it was like going into of course, the pandemic. We had no idea 2020. We had all these shows planned. I actually found like some old emails. It was like in Helsinki and some of these other shows that we were like supposed to do together in 2020, but we got to double back on some of those. But yeah, and so when the opportunity came, it was just like, wow, I'm so glad that we're actually doing what we said we would do, and that we're and to me, every time we work together, it reminds me of Q. Yeah. Because it's like that was the first time we met. So I feel like we're honoring Q and we're doing what he would want us to do.
Even in this tribute to Aretha Franklin, you're also bringing a tribute to Quincy Jones and his legacy.
Exactly.
I looked up some old interviews that Aretha did, and maybe these are some encouraging words for her, for the both of you, about other artists covering her songs.
How do you feel about artists covering your songs?
It's the most sincere form of flattery. It really is. In most instances, it is.
Especially had to add that little.
Just a little bit of shade at the end there. Who was singing that night? That's what I want to know.
Patti LaBelle.
Was it?
No, I'm joking.
Okay.
But there's this funny video of her like giving Patti like the side eye, like when she was like doing one of her songs.
There are like all kinds of different compilations of Aretha and her shady side.
Yeah,
she's so dignified, saying like it's such a big, and then
most of the time.
Gowns,
beautiful gowns.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
At the end of the podcast that you can look up in your podcast app, it's a little extended version of this conversation and also a little backstage interpretation of myself just walking around today at the performance. We're gonna listen to a very beautiful song. A very, very beautiful song that you selected, Sheléa. We asked you, like, what song can we put out there for people to kind of understand, not only in words, but also in music, what this tribute is about. And you selected Till You Come Back to Me, Until You Come Back to Me, originally by Stevie Wonder.
That's right.
I have it right here. Do you want to listen to it for a little bit and then talk about it?
Cool. Wow. So this is Stevie's version.
Yeah.
Oh, my Stevie.
No, you don't call anymore. I sit and wait in vain. I guess I'll rap on your door, tap on your window pane.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I wanna tell you, baby, the change.
Now I'm going to fade out a little bit. Because of, putting this on YouTube and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Timing. 29 seconds, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a song. Well,
Wow.
because the song was originally written by Stevie, then
Yeah.
Aretha sang it, made it like a big song, and then afterwards Stevie also came out with that song.
Yeah.
And I think 1973 it came out for Aretha.
Man, it's mad how many songs he wrote for other people.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
It is
Because
crazy.
I heard a rehearsal tape of him jamming out Bet You Wouldn't Hurt Me, like with his band in the early 80s.
Right.
And I don't know, that must have been after Patty had recorded it.
Wow.
But
Can't Help It for Michael
Yeah.
Oh,
Jackson.
wow,
yeah,
yeah.
totally.
And the one that I was like, oh my gosh, Tell Me Something Good, Shaka Khan.
Oh,
But what's
wow,
crazy
yeah.
is you hear the chords.
Yeah,
Like after you
totally.
realize it, you
Yeah.
hear the da da
Yeah.
da. He loves that chromatic
Yeah.
changes,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you
But
hear it
also-
Until You Come Back to Me for sure.
And I find it so funny that one of the little jokes that is in Aretha's version of Until You Come Back to Me is the you stand in front of my door and you hear the duh, 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 like
Yeah,
the knock on the door.
knocking. Yeah.
And I was wondering, do you do that with the orchestra as well? Is that some part that you kind of took in, adapted? I find it so funny. And
Yeah, that's
It is. I kind of do the little motion like in the air, you know.
nice.
But yeah, it's crazy. Like I've heard Stevie's version, but I guess hearing it kind of afresh, like as we're doing this show, you really see how much Aretha just makes songs her own. You know, even the melody line, she kind of decided not to do that octave. She kept it, though you don't call anymore, though you don't call. She didn't do that, you know, and then just her timing and pacing of things. It's very different. It's like she kind of put the emphasis on, she kind of swung it more a little bit.
Yeah.
It was like a little bit looser.
yeah.
But yeah, they're both so special. I hear
Yeah.
such a sweet innocence in Stevie in that record, and to hear Aretha just take it to another level, which she usually does with songs, you know. Same thing with Respect. She's like, it's mine now.
Absolutely.
Ava, for you, like as a listener as well as a connoisseur and,
Yeah.
and a working in this world, where would you put Aretha in your top? Is she in your top 5?
Of vocalists?
Yeah,
Yeah, probably she is.
I think she's got to be, right?
Well, it's very hard to put Aretha anywhere. I mean,
Right.
if not at number one,
could just
because
put her
she's
at the
just
top,
couldn't we?
such a legend.
Yeah.
I think so.
But there are some other very cool vocalists, but in different genres and in different styles and in
Yeah.
different. I mean,
Because when we did
but
a
the
gig,
individuality of Aretha is crazy.
And then the
love that.
musicality
Oh
too.
yeah, absolutely.
It's like she wasn't just a singer. She
Yeah.
was a musician. She
Yeah.
was a songwriter, you know, an arranger. So I that puts her at number 1 to me, because, you know, someone was having this debate, and
I think we've had this debate.
did we?
Yeah, we had it after,
we were talking about.
in Bremen.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
with the whole gang, we went to Music Fest
That's
Bremen,
right, that's
and we
right.
played there. It was beautiful. We've been a couple of times, and we were lucky enough to play the show with Sheléa and with the Metropole. And I think afterwards we were hanging out, and then we had this discussion over dinner of like, who is the top?
Yeah.
And I think we started kind of like female singers, male singers.
Right. It was hard to just do everybody.
No.
And then we tried to combine it into like, well, who is like the OG of OGs, you know? And I think she was up there.
She was up there.
Yeah.
I mean, but like, who sings like Sarah Vaughan? Who sings like Ella Fitzgerald?
I know.
You know?
Yeah.
The only point that I have made sometimes when people have compared like Sarah Vaughan and Ella to Aretha. By the way, there is a video of Aretha, Roberta Flack, Peggy Lee, and Sarah Vaughan. They are doing a tribute to Duke Ellington. And it's this whole medley. I have never seen Aretha smile like she did when Sarah Vaughan was singing. It was like, who moves the heroes?
Yeah.
You know, like who touches like the vocal, like Sarah was like, she studied Sarah. And it was so sweet seeing her fangirl over her, because I have never in all of my life seen Aretha crack a smile or do anything when someone else was singing. She was up there and Sarah did something and she just like, she just did this little smile, and it was the most precious thing. By the way, I want to recreate that at some point. I think I sent it to you. But the recording is kind of like wonky. It's on YouTube, but it is, I mean, it brought tears to my eyes, like literally. And it's like this, everybody is like at the top of their game, but just singing so well. But to my original point, we hear when Aretha was doing those standards, and she was able to actually do them quite effectively. She was able to use a lot of restraint.
Yeah.
Until that crazy high A flat on Skylark. But I don't know if Ella and Sarah could do Respect. That's the difference to me. Mm-hmm. When I put her just a little bit above, it's like she can do the standards. But could Ella and Sarah do
what Aretha did?
What
with
Aretha
the
did?
Yeah.
Well, no, with like Respect or Natural Woman.
Okay.
You know, they would still sing it in their own way.
Yeah.
But I just, that soulfulness, that range to where she can like give you as much soul as you need, but then pull it all back and sing in this elegant, beautiful, pristine way for these standards like Skylark. I mean, it's this beautiful tone, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my reason behind her
I
being
think this
number one.
conversation could go on for hours and hours and hours.
We had some funny artists in the top 10. People kept chucking in some curveballs, didn't they?
They were.
Yeah, but we shouldn't name and shame.
No, we should.
I think we're going to have to wrap up, because in 10 minutes you'll be doing a sound check and the whole orchestra is waiting for you, and I'm keeping you up. But I want to just share with you some of the challenges of Aretha's life when asked about her biggest challenge. So we can all sit for a moment and really think about it.
Mm-hmm. What are the biggest challenges for you?
The biggest challenges for me is trying to figure out what to cook for dinner nightly, you know, just night after night. What is it going to be tonight?
You don't actually cook your own dinner, do you?
Oh, please. I do my own washing, my own cooking, my own ironing, all of that.
No.
Yeah. So,
see, now there's something nobody would know.
You have to figure, what is it going to be tonight? I did that last night. That's the hardest thing right there.
Wow.
I think that's kind of a way of saying, like, I don't want to do things the same way ever. You know?
I think that was also
like
deflecting.
A metaphor.
I think that was deflecting.
It definitely was.
She did not want to go personal.
No, she did. She didn't. I didn't find any personal quotes
She
of
never
her
does.
ever.
She never did. She never talked about her personal life in that way. No.
But also, I thought it was a beautiful metaphor of her.
It is. She doesn't do the same thing twice. No. Billie Holiday said she never sings the song twice. You know, I think in those days they kind of wanted it to be new to themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what helped them get to like a really cool performance of making it interesting for them first. Yeah. And then for the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, touring in those days was hard. You know, it was really hard. It was bussing everywhere, and, you know, they did crazy amounts of gigs, didn't they?
She didn't like flying, huh? She didn't like going
in
on
her
planes
later years.
In her later years.
Yeah.
So she had
Can
to
understand that, yeah.
That's why she hadn't been to, when we did it the Royal Albert Hall, they were just like she hadn't been there since. Because didn't the Queen ask her to come and she still didn't come?
Well, she was the Queen. There was only. It's like, no,
I think she was just too scared.
I don't recognise your sovereignty because I've got my own. Thank you very much.
I think that beautiful quote of Jules wraps up this episode of Before Showtime. Thank you so much, Sheléa and Jules. Good luck with the performance tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching, if you enjoyed this conversation, then make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss any upcoming episode. Prefer listening to the audio experience of this day, how it continues, the full song and everything. We'll dive deeper in this tribute to Aretha Franklin. This episode is also available as an audio podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the major podcast platforms. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for being with me and spending some time here in the studio. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Before Showtime, featuring a new guest, new conversation, and I see you next time before Showtime.
Thanks, Eva.
That's it.
Nice.
Thank
cool.
you so much.
Great job.
Thank you.